Hey YouTubers, Mike Borders with the Mike Borders channel. Thank you for watching. We have been working on our Chevy Cruze all weekend long, doing a lot of things to the coolant system, and now it is time to show you the step-by-step process on how to properly, safely, and carefully add coolant to the entire system. Let's take a look. Referencing the front of the engine, let's go to the left side, and underneath the hose that comes out of your air filter box, down below, not sure if you can see it, but there is a bleeder screw or a bleeder valve. Grab your Phillips screwdriver and carefully and slowly remove this. Two things to take into consideration. Number one, it's plastic. Try not to break it when you're removing it. And number two, be very careful as you remove it, because in the event that you drop this in the engine, it might be tricky to find. And before even inserting a Phillips screwdriver tip, make sure the tip is very thick and bulky. Do not use a needle nose type tip because that will strip it. And as we unscrew it, a little bit of coolant may come out. However, most likely not, because in the previous projects we did flush the entire system. There's what the part looks like. Fully removed. Again, be careful as you remove this. You don't want to drop it. Let's go and set this in a safe location. Next step is carefully remove the reservoir cap and set that aside. Next, grab your owner's manual, section 11-12, engine coolant, 50-50 mixture of clean drinkable water, and use only Dex Cool coolant. GM Dex Cool. Reference your owner's manual. This is a Dex Cool approved. Prestone 50-50 is the solution that we are going to use. In the event that you want to go full solution and mix it with water, that's up to you. However, this is the recommended coolant for our specific Chevy Cruze. And the main benefit with this, number one, it's GM and approved. The 50-50 mix means we don't have to mix anything or pre-mix or spend time mixing this with water. It's already done for convenient and easy use. Let's go and remove the cap. What we did after removing the cap is we basically cut half of this circular portion open, and we will pour from this side. So over here, you will notice an arrow. That is your proper fill parameter line. Go ahead and fill the fluid up to that point. From here, let's carefully and slowly pour fluid into the reservoir tank. If you have a funnel, that is definitely a plus. However, we don't. We are going to carefully and slowly insert the fluid. All the way up to the fill line. And as we fill it, we can hear the bubbling, and that's a good thing because the coolant is traveling through the system now. And we want to continue filling up the coolant reservoir until we have coolant coming out of that hole where we removed the valve. Once coolant comes out of there, immediately put the valve back in, tighten it down, don't over tighten it, and be careful again because it's plastic. Coolant's coming out pretty good, and again, just be careful as you retighten this. It's plastic, you don't want to cross thread or harm the actual valve. I went ahead and hand tightened it as much as I could. Now I've got the screwdriver, again Phillips, and go ahead and secure it. Grab a paper towel and wipe as much of that coolant as possible off of this portion here and all down the side of the radiator. And the reason we want to do that is because that is a point where it could leak, and we want to verify after we get this whole project done and we're doing the leak test, we want to make sure there's no leaks. Overflow coolant reservoir is properly at the fill parameter. From here, make sure you keep the cap off. We're going to hop inside the car, start the engine, and let the engine warm up to allow this coolant to get to its proper temperature. And with this cap off, it doesn't allow it to pressurize. It allows it to push any air and burn any air out of the system. And from here, we want to select the menu and scroll through until we get the coolant temperature. Next step, come down to your heat and turn it all the way to the full heat. Come over to your fan and shift it one notch above off. That's on low. And we want this heater to begin heating up. As the engine runs, you will notice that coolant level will slightly drop, and that's because the coolant is beginning to travel and make its way through the engine. And again, we want all that air out of the system. And by letting this engine run for about 10 minutes, we want that coolant to get to its operating temperature. And once it gets to about 220 degrees, this thermostat over here is going to open up and allow the coolant to travel through the remainder portion of the entire system. And the way that you know that the coolant basically has heated up and opened up the thermostat, you've got your radiator fan going, and that's usually an indication that your engine has exceeded the temperature without the coolant flowing through, and that thermostat wants that coolant to continue its flow through the entire engine, again, to properly cool it. And during this 10 to 15 minutes of the engine running to idle, allowing that coolant to warm up, we're just going to check all the areas where coolant flows through, and we want to verify that there are no leaks throughout the entire system. Coming out of the actual reservoir tank, follow the hoses everywhere it goes along the entire system of the engine, through here, down into there, over here as far as your thermostat, and down below for your radiator. Just verify no leaks. It's been about 15 minutes of the engine running at idle, and again, that coolant level has slightly dropped, and we are going to re-secure the cap. After the cap is on and secure, that is going to allow the entire coolant system to properly pressurize, and that's what we want. Now for the fun part, let's go ahead and close the hood and take the car for a test drive. As we drive the car, we want to make sure that the engine temperature goes no higher than this point right here. If it exceeds the halfway point, chances are your engine is not cooling properly. Alright YouTubers, we just did a 30-mile drive and went through all the gears on the engine and got this engine up to full speed, and the temperature remained solid at that point. Again, that's the point where you do not want that needle to exceed. In the event that it goes above half, something's wrong with your cooling system and you need to address it. Chances are you might have low coolant and you need to add a little more. From here, let's pop the hood and go check for any leaks. Back outside at the engine, and in a previous video we replaced this entire tank because that bottom hose, it was leaking from that point where the hose connected to the tank, and as we can see here, no leaks, and that's a good thing. Going over to the thermostat, in the previous video we also replaced the thermostat, and it was spraying pretty good where the actual thermostat connects to the engine, and inside that part's a rubber seal, and the new part is holding on very well. No leaks. That's a good thing. And again, just run through the remainder portion, all the hoses, every other additional part that your coolant travels through, and just verify no leaks. At this point, I have the engine turned off and back referencing the reservoir tank in the event that you need to add more fluid over time. The very first thing you want to take into consideration, this system is now very hot and very pressurized because we just drove it 30 miles, and before driving it, we let it run at idle for 15 minutes. Do not, I repeat, do not take this cap off right now. Let the car sit for a minimum of 3 hours. It's even recommended to let the engine sit overnight to allow the engine to properly cool off. If you took this cap off right now, all the pressure and all the heat of the actual coolant will burst out and spray all over your face and burn your eyes. That's not good. After letting the engine cool for a minimum of 3 hours or overnight, grab a bunch of paper towel and position it over the cap and slowly and carefully twist the cap off, because any excess pressure on this actual system, you want this towel to catch and not allow it to spray at your face and burn your face and eyes. That's it, YouTubers. See a pretty friendly DIY do-it-yourself project. Do us a favor, below the video you will see that thumbs up icon. Click on that, like the video, subscribe to the channel, definitely go to your settings, turn on your YouTube notification bell. Once you do that, every video that we upload, you will be notified. You will be able to stay up to date with us, and that will be awesome. Hey, thanks again for watching.